She had $40, a bruised rib, and no future. When 19-year-old Elena bought a rusted-out Harley-Davidson from a junkyard to escape her abusive stepfather, she thought she was just buying a piece of trash. The next morning, 97 Hells Angels surrounded her. They weren't there to steal it. They were there to collect a debt. The rain in Oak Haven, Nevada didn't wash things clean. It just turned the dust into a suffocating mud. For 19-year-old Elena Jenkins, the mud was preferable to the house she was leaving behind. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. Elena's right eye was swollen shut, a vibrant canvas of purple and black, courtesy of her stepfather, Rick Dawson. Rick was a man who communicated entirely through the bottom of a bourbon bottle and the back of his heavy, calloused hand. Ever since Elena's mother passed away 3 years prior, Rick had turned a crumbling suburban house into a prison, treating Elena not as a daughter but as a live-in maid and a punching bag for his gambling frustrations. Tonight had been the breaking point. He had promised to sell her mother's wedding ring to cover a poker debt. When Elena tried to stop him, he threw her against the kitchen counter, cracking her rib. As Rick passed out in his recliner, the television casting a sickly blue glow over his face, Elena made her move. She packed a single canvas backpack, 2 pairs of jeans, a few shirts, a flashlight, and an old coffee tin containing her entire life savings, $65.12. She slipped out the window, the cold rain instantly soaking through her thin flannel jacket. She didn't have a car, she didn't have a phone, but she knew she had to get out of Oak Haven before sunrise, or Rick would wake up and finish what he started. Elena walked 3 miles to the edge of town, her boots sinking into the wet gravel shoulder of Highway 9. Her destination was Gabriel Stone's Salvage and Scrap. Gabriel was a grumpy, reclusive Korean War veteran missing 2 fingers on his left hand. He didn't ask questions, and he didn't care about town gossip. When she banged on the corrugated tin door of his shop, the old man emerged holding a double-barreled shotgun and a scowl. "We're closed, kid," Gabriel barked, lowering the weapon slightly when he saw her standing in the downpour, shivering and battered. "I need a ride, Gabriel," Elena pleaded, her voice trembling. "I don't care what it is. A lawnmower with a seat attached, a rusted-out dirt bike. Anything that runs. I have to leave." Gabriel's eyes drifted to her bruised face. A silent understanding passed between them. He had known her mother. He knew what Rick was. "I ain't got much the gruns," Gabriel grumbled, gesturing for her to step out of the rain and into the cavernous, oil-smelling garage. Mostly stripped chassis and dead alternators. Got a 98 Civic, but the transmission is shot. Won't make it 2 miles. "Please," Elena whispered, tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. "Look around. Anything." Gabriel scratched his gray, stubbled chin. He walked to the far back corner of the garage, past a mountain of bald tires, and stopped in front of a heavy canvas tarp. He grabbed the corner and pulled it back, kicking up a cloud of decades-old dust. Beneath it sat a motorcycle. It was a 1974 Harley-Davidson Ironhead Sportster, or at least the ghost of one. The chrome was heavily pitted with rust, the leather seat was cracked and spilling its yellow foam innards, and the gas tank, painted a faded matte black, was dented on the left side. It looked like it had been dragged out of the swamp. "Been sitting here for 12 years, Gabriel muttered, kicking the front tire. Guy dropped it off for scrap back in 14. Never had the heart to crush it. Engine's temperamental, leaks oil like a stuck pig, and the brakes are a suggestion at best. But I got her to turn over a few months back." "How much?" Elena asked, her heart hammering against her bruised rib. Gabriel looked at the girl, then at the bike. "Normally, I'd sell it for parts for $300, but I know you ain't got that." Elena pulled the crumpled bills from her pocket. "I have $65, but I need gas money. I can give you $40 for a Harley-Davidson." It was a laughable, absurd proposition. Any other day, any other person, Gabriel would have chased them off his lot with the shotgun, but he looked at Elena's black eye, and he heard the desperation rattling in her lungs. $40, Gabriel said, his voice softer now. And you promise me you never come back to Oakhaven. I promise, she said without hesitation. Gabriel took the two crumpled $20 bills. He spent the next hour showing her the absolute basics. He topped off the oil, patched a dry rotted fuel line with electrical tape, and poured a gallon of premium gas into the tank. He showed her how to kickstart the stubborn iron head, warning her about the heavy clutch and the phantom neutral. It's a suicide machine if you don't respect it, Gabriel warned as he rolled it out into the dying rain. The storm was breaking, giving way to the dark, pre-dawn chill. She vibrates so hard your teeth will rattle, but if she decides she likes you, she'll get you across the state line. Elena climbed onto the cracked leather seat. The metal was freezing. She turned the key, pulled the choke, and kicked the starter. Nothing. She tried again, putting all her meager weight into it. The engine coughed. On the fourth try, the iron head roared to life with a deafening, thunderous crack, crack, crack that shook the entire frame. The exhaust spat a thick cloud of blue smoke into the air. "Go!" Gabriel yelled over the roar of the engine. "Keep to the back roads. And keep the RPMs up or she'll stall." Elena didn't look back. She dumped the clutch, almost stalling the heavy beast, and wobbled out of the junkyard. As she hit the open asphalt of Route 9, the cold wind whipping through her wet hair, a profound sense of terrifying freedom washed over her. The motorcycle was loud, uncomfortable, and reeked of gasoline. But for the first time in 3 years, Elena felt like she was moving forward. Little did she know, the rusted piece of metal between her knees carried a history far heavier than the iron it was forged from. By 10 a.m. the next day, the adrenaline had completely worn off, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion and a creeping panic. Elena had made it 80 miles into the sun-scorched Mojave Desert. The landscape had transformed from wet pine trees to an endless, shimmering expanse of cracked dirt, Joshua trees, and heat waves. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly, baking the black leather seat and radiating off the asphalt. The iron head had been complaining for the last 20 miles. The engine was running dangerously hot, knocking loudly with every gear shift. The oil Gabriel had poured in was currently painting the side of the engine block in a dark, greasy slick. Elena's hands were blistered from gripping the heavy clutch, and her bruised ribs screamed with every pothole she hit. She saw the salvation of a faded, neon sign shimmering in the distance. Miller's Outpost, Eights and Gas. It was a dilapidated diner and gas station sitting entirely alone on a straight stretch of 2-lane highway. There were no other cars in the gravel parking lot, just a stray dog sleeping under the ice machine. Elena pulled the clutch in to coast toward the gas pumps. As she did, the Harley gave one final, violent shudder, let out a metallic clank that sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil, and died completely. The rear tire locked up for a terrifying second, skidding on the gravel before she managed to wrestle the heavy bike to a stop next to pump number 2. She sat there for a moment, the silence of the desert rushing in to replace the deafening roar of the exhaust. She tried to kickstart it again. The kick lever wouldn't even budge. The engine was seized. "No, no, no," Elena whispered, tears of pure frustration welling up. She climbed off the bike, her legs trembling from the vibration, and sank to the ground beside the rusted exhaust pipes. She was stranded in the middle of nowhere with $25, a broken rib, and a dead $40 motorcycle. She went inside the diner. The air conditioning was broken. A bored waitress named Betty poured her a glass of tap water. Elena sat in a vinyl booth, staring out the window at the dead Harley, trying to figure out if she could hitchhike. Then her blood turned to ice water. Pulling off the highway and crunching into the gravel parking lot was a rusted, dark green 1999 Ford F-150. The front grille was missing, and the passenger side window was taped up with plastic. It was Rick. He had woken up, realized she was gone, and likely beat the information out of someone in town. Maybe he even recognized the fresh tire tracks leading away from Gabriel's. The desert highway only went one direction, out of Oakhaven. Elena's breath hitched in her throat. She slid down into the booth, hoping he hadn't seen her. But Rick didn't look at the diner first. He parked his truck directly behind the dead Harley-Davidson, blocking it in. He stepped out of the truck. He was a massive man, over 250 pounds, wearing a dirty white undershirt and steel-toed boots. In his right hand, he carried a heavy iron tire iron. He kicked the Harley's front tire, knocking the bike off its kickstand and sending it crashing into the dirt. "Elena!" Rick bellowed, his voice carrying through the thin glass windows of the diner. "I know you're in there. Get out here right now, or I'm coming in to drag you out by your hair." "No, I'd eat." Betty, the waitress, backed away from the counter, eyes wide with fear. "Honey," she whispered to Elena, "do you want me to call the sheriff? It would take him 45 minutes to get out here." "There's no time," Elena said, her voice shaking. If she stayed inside, he would corner her. If she went outside, she was in the open. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead, and pushed the diner door open. The desert heat hit her instantly. "There you are, you little thief," Rick sneered, tapping the tire iron against his palm. "You thought you could just take my money and run. I had to tear my whole house apart looking for that coffee tin." "It was my money, Rick," Elena yelled back, trying to keep the distance between them. "I earned it. Leave me alone." And a boat. "You live under my roof, you eat my food, your money is my money." He took a step forward, his eyes dark with violence. "Now get in the truck, we're going home, and you're going to learn a lesson about respect. I'm not going anywhere with you." Elena screamed, backing up against the wooden siding of the diner. Rick lunged. He was surprisingly fast for his size. He grabbed her by her thin flannel jacket, hoisting her almost off her feet, slamming her back against the wall. The impact jarred her broken rib, and a blinding flash of white pain exploded in her chest. She gasped, unable to breathe. He raised the tire iron. "I'm going to break your legs, and then I'm going to throw you in the bed of the truck," Rick hissed, his breath reeking of stale liquor and chewing tobacco. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact. But the blow never came. Instead, a sound began to build. It started low, a vibration that Elena could feel through the wooden planks of the diner at her back. It felt like a minor earthquake. The pebbles in the gravel parking lot began to visibly tremble. The stray dog under the ice machine bolted into the desert. The sound grew louder, a deep, guttural, unified roar that swallowed the silence of the Mojave. It was the sound of thunder tearing across the asphalt. Rick paused, his grip loosening on Elena's jacket as he turned to look down the highway. Coming over the crest of the desert road was a wall of black leather and chrome. It wasn't just a few motorcycles. It was an army, row after row of massive, heavily modified V-twin cruisers riding in tight, disciplined formation. The sun glinted off the chrome ape-hanger handlebars and custom exhaust. At the front of the pack rode a man built like a redwood tree. As the formation closed in on Miller's outpost, they didn't just roar past. The lead rider raised a single leather-gloved fist into the air. 97 motorcycles signaled, downshifted, and swarmed the parking lot of the diner. They circled the gas pumps. They blocked the exits. They completely surrounded Rick's beat-up Ford F-150. The noise was absolutely deafening, a physical force that pressed against the chest. The riders wore heavy leather cuts over denim jackets. On their backs was the unmistakable, terrifying insignia, a skull with wings, the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Rick dropped Elena completely, taking 2 panicked steps backward. His tire iron suddenly looked like a plastic toy compared to the heavy chains, combat knives, and sheer physical intimidation of the men surrounding him. The engines cut off in a wave, leaving a heavy, ringing silence in the desert air, punctuated only by the tick-tick of cooling metal. The lead rider, the giant of a man, kicked his stand down and stepped off his custom road ride. His name patch read Dave Trestonent. Big Dave Sullivan had a beard that reached his chest, arms covered in prison ink, and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world and laughed at it. He didn't look at Rick. He didn't look at Elena. Big Dave walked slowly, deliberately toward the rusted, oil-leaking 1974 iron head that Rick had kicked over into the dirt. The other 96 members dismounted, standing in absolute silence, forming a human barricade around the perimeter. The tension in the air was so thick you could choke on it. Dave knelt in the dirt beside the fallen Harley. He reached out with a massive, calloused hand and gently brushed away the dirt and grime from the left side of the gas tank, the side with a heavy dent. He traced his thumb over a series of scratched, barely visible engravings etched into the metal just below the fuel cap. DS, S thanks Sal, and J, S, Ride Free 1978. Big Dave stood up slowly. His eyes shifted from the motorcycle to Rick Dawson. The president of the Nevada Charter didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Who?" Big Dave rumbled, a voice like rocks grinding together. "Kicked over my brother's bike." The heavy silence that followed Big Dave Sullivan's question was thicker than the Nevada heat. 97 pairs of eyes hardened by miles of asphalt and a lifestyle built on fierce loyalty bored into Rick Dawson. Rick's bluster evaporated instantly. The tire iron slipped from his trembling, sweaty grip and hit the gravel with a pathetic clink. He took another step back, raising his hands defensively, his massive frame suddenly looking remarkably small. I didn't know whose it was," Rick stammered, his voice cracking. He pointed a shaking finger at Elena, who was still pinned against the diner's weathered siding. "The girl stole my money. She bought that piece of junk to run away. I was just trying to get my money back." Big Dave didn't look at Elena. He didn't even look at Rick's pointing finger. He took a slow, deliberate step toward Rick. Dave stood 6'4", a mountain of leather and muscle, and when he moved, the crowd of bikers shifted subtly with him, tightening the perimeter. "You called it a piece of junk," Dave rumbled, his voice low, dangerously calm. "You kicked it into the dirt." A biker, to Dave's left, a heavily tattooed man with a sergeant-at-arms patch that read Hacksaw, stepped forward. "Want me to take his tongue, boss?" Hacksaw asked casually, pulling a heavy, custom-machined hunting knife from a sheath on his belt. "No," Dave said, raising a hand. He kept his eyes locked on Rick. He's going to listen, and then he's going to understand exactly what he just disrespected. Dave gestured to the fallen 1974 iron head. "That bike belonged to Jimmy Sullivan, my little brother. In 1982, Jimmy was run off the road by a drunk driver in a pickup truck just outside of Reno. He didn't make it. The police impounded the bike, and by the time I got out of the hospital to claim it, some crooked tow yard operator had sold it off the books. I spent 34 years looking for that iron head, 34 years tracking VIN numbers, kicking down chop shop doors and shaking down scrap dealers from here to the Mexican border." Dave took another step, backing Rick up against the grill of his own battered Ford F-150. "That dent in the tank," Dave continued, his voice tightening with decades of unresolved grief. "Jimmy put that there when he dropped it in the Grand Canyon parking lot in '79. We laughed about it for a week. That engraving, I carved it myself with a pocket knife the day he got his full patch." Rick was sweating profusely now. The color had completely drained from his face. "Man, I swear to God I didn't know," Rick pleaded, tears of pure terror welling in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Take the bike. It's yours." "It was always mine," Dave corrected him, "but you laid hands on it. And worse, you laid hands on the girl who found it." Dave finally turned his head to look at Elena. She was shivering despite the 100-degree heat, her right eye swollen shut, her chest rising and falling in shallow, painful gasps. Dave's hard eyes softened for a fraction of a second as he took in her battered state. He knew abuse when he saw it. He'd do that to you? Dave asked her. Elena, finding a reservoir of courage she didn't know she possessed, looked the Hells Angels president in the eye and nodded. Yes, he broke my rib last night. A collective dark murmur rippled through the 97 men. There was a strict unspoken code among the riders. You didn't touch women, and you didn't touch kids. Dave turned back to Rick. You're a brave man, beating up a teenage girl. Let's see how brave you are right now. Dave gave a subtle nod. Hacksaw, along with 3 other massive bikers, descended on Rick's Ford F-150. They didn't touch Rick, they didn't need to. In less than 60 seconds, they orchestrated a symphony of mechanical destruction. Hacksaw used his knife to slash all 4 tires, the air hissing out violently into the desert dust. Another biker took a heavy chain and smashed the headlights, the windshield, and the mirrors. A third popped the hood and took a crowbar to the radiator and the distributor cap. The truck was completely irreversibly dead. Rick fell to his knees in the gravel, sobbing openly, a broken shell of the tyrant he'd been in Oakhaven. Dave stepped over to Rick and leaned down so only the 2 of them could hear the final verdict. You are going to walk back to wherever you came from, Dave whispered, his voice like grinding glass. If I ever hear your name again, if I ever find out you came looking for this girl, I won't send my brothers. I will come for you myself. Do we have an understanding? Rick nodded, frantically weeping into his dirty hands. Start walking, Dave ordered. Rick scrambled to his feet and began half running, half stumbling down the burning asphalt of Highway 9, leaving his ruined truck behind. The bikers parted in silence to let him through, their cold stares following him until he was nothing but a shimmering speck in the desert heat waves. With Rick gone, the oppressive tension in the parking lot finally snapped. Dave walked over to the fallen Harley-Davidson. With surprising gentleness, he grabbed the handlebars and hoisted the heavy, oil-leaking machine back upright, kicking the stand into place. He pulled a red bandana from his back pocket and carefully wiped the desert dust off the engraved D, S and J, Thal-1, S on the gas tank. Then he walked over to Elena. She was still pressed against the diner wall, overwhelmed and exhausted. You okay, kid? Dave asked, his massive frame blocking out the blinding sun. My rib hurts, Elena whispered. And my bike is dead. Dave let out a deep, rumbling chuckle. Yeah, Jimmy's iron head always was a stubborn mule. Never liked the heat. How did you get it? Elena explained everything. She told him about her mother dying, about Rick's drinking and gambling, and the $40 she gave to Gabriel at the salvage yard just to escape. She told him how the bike fought her the whole way, practically shaking her teeth loose, before finally seizing up at the gas pump. Dave listened in silence. When she finished, he looked back at the rusted iron head. It didn't seize up on you to leave you stranded, Dave said quietly. It seized up to make you stop here. If you had kept riding, he would have run you off the road in that truck. Jimmy's bike saved your life. Elena looked at the rusted machine. For the first time, it didn't look like a piece of junk. It looked like a guardian angel draped in pitted chrome. I bought it fair and square, Elena said, a hint of defiance returning to her voice. I gave Gabriel my last $40. I don't have anything else. Dave smiled, a genuine, warm expression that completely transformed his scarred face. I know you did, and the Hells Angels honor a fair trade. But this bike belongs with the club. It's family, so I'm going to buy it back from you. Dave unzipped his heavy leather cut and pulled out a thick, folded stack of $100 bills. He peeled off several and handed them to her. Elena stared at the money. It was more cash than she had ever seen in her life. But wait, Dave said, raising his hand. He turned to the crowd of bikers. Brothers, this girl spent her last dime to rescue Jimmy's ghost from a scrap heap. She brought him back to us. What's that worth to the Nevada Charter? Hacksaw was the first to move. He pulled off his leather riding glove, reached into his denim pocket, and pulled out a wad of cash. tossing it into a leather saddlebag unclipped from a nearby bike. "For Jimmy," Axel grunted. One by one, all 96 remaining members walked past the saddlebag. They dropped in 20s, 50s, hundreds. They were outlaws, mechanics, construction workers, and bouncers. But in that moment, they were a unified family paying a debt of honor. When the last man had walked past, Dave picked up the heavy leather bag and handed it to Elena. "There's over $12,000 in there," Dave said. "That's for the bike, and that's to start your new life." Elena took the heavy bag, her knees buckling slightly. The tears she had been fighting back finally spilled over. She had woken up that morning with a bruised face, $65, and no hope. Now, she was holding a fortune. I don't know what to say," Elena cried, clutching the leather bag to her chest. "You don't have to say anything," Dave replied. He signaled to the back of the pack. A large black support truck with an enclosed trailer pulled up. Two bikers lowered the ramp and carefully, reverently, pushed Jimmy's rusted iron head up into the trailer, securing it with heavy ratcheting straps. Dave pulled a small, black business card from his pocket and pressed it into Elena's hand. There was no logo on it, just a single phone number. "You take that money, and you get on a bus to San Diego," Dave instructed. "You get an apartment by the beach. You go to school. You live a good life. If anyone ever gives you trouble, if Rick ever manages to crawl out of this desert and find you, you call that number. Tell them Big Dave sent you. You'll have 100 of my brothers at your door before the sun goes down." "Thank you," Elena sobbed, throwing her arms around the giant biker. Dave hesitated for a moment, then awkwardly patted her on the back with his massive gloved hand. "Ride safe, kid," Dave said. He turned and walked back to his custom road glide. He threw his leg over the saddle and fired up the massive B-twin engine. The sound was a deafening battle cry. 96 other engines roared to life in unison, shaking the desert dust from the roof of Miller's outpost. Elena stood by the gas pumps, clutching the saddlebag of cash, as the formation pulled out onto Highway 9. They rode in perfect, thundering unity, a tidal wave of chrome and black leather disappearing into the shimmering Mojave horizon. She was bruised, she was exhausted, and she was miles from anywhere. But as she watched the last motorcycle vanish over the hill, Elena Jenkins took a deep, painless breath. For the first time in her life, she was truly free. If Elena's incredible journey of survival and her unexpected rescue by the Biker Brotherhood moved you, please hit that like button. This story proves that guardians can come in the most unexpected forms. Don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a jaw-dropping twist. And hit subscribe for more unbelievable real-life tales of redemption and courage every single week. Keep riding free.